Afraid of you, Lennox, and we're gonna get it on. I owe you one.
Okay.
You're not the man I thought you were. You lied on me. I thought we was cool.
Yo, bring it on, man.
Hey, I'm gonna bring it.
Lennox Lewis dominated the heavyweight division like few others in boxing history, retiring as the undisputed champion with victories over every major contender of his era. The 6'5" British-Canadian giant possessed the perfect combination of size, skill, and power that made him a nightmare for any opponent who dared step into the ring with him.
Body shot by Lewis, taking those gloves, leaving Lewis with what around 7.
But even legends feel fear. Even the most dominant champions have those sleepless nights before facing certain opponents, wondering if this might be the fight where everything goes wrong. Lewis faced killers, punchers, and warriors who could end careers with a single punch, and he felt the weight of that danger every single time.
It was around, but if this fight continues to go on and on and on.
Now, years after hanging up his gloves, Lennox Lewis opens up about the 10 boxers who truly scared him, the fighters who made him question whether his skills would be enough to survive the night. Some names will shock you, while others will make perfect sense. 10. David Tua. David Tua was a 5'10" block of granite from Samoa who packed devastating knockout power in both hands despite being significantly shorter than Lewis. What made Tua terrifying wasn't just his power, but his ability to close distance and unleash brutal combinations to the body and head that had put numerous heavyweights to sleep. Lewis admits that Tua's compact, explosive style represented a real danger because one mistake in distance management could result in a career-ending knockout. David was like a pit bull, Lewis recalls. Once he got inside, he could hurt you badly. I had to be perfect with my jab and footwork. Their 2000 fight saw Lewis dominate through superior boxing skills, but he never forgot how close disaster was every time Tua managed to slip inside his long reach and land those devastating hooks. 9. Riddick Bowe. Riddick Bowe was the 6'5", 240-pound giant who possessed everything Lewis feared most in an opponent: comparable size, devastating power, exceptional boxing skills, and the heart of a true warrior. Bowe had already proven himself by defeating Evander Holyfield in brutal wars, establishing himself as the division's most complete fighter. Lewis desperately wanted the Bowe fight in the early 1990s when both were in their primes, but Bowe famously dumped the WBC title in a trash can rather than face his mandatory challenger. Riddick knew what that fight would be, Lewis admits. Two big men with skills, someone was going to get seriously hurt. The fear wasn't about losing. It was about the level of violence required to beat someone with Bowe's combination of size, skill, and determination. The fight never happened, leaving boxing with one of its greatest what-ifs. 8. Ray Mercer. Ray Mercer was a 1988 Olympic gold medalist who carried absolutely terrifying one-punch knockout power in his right hand. Former opponents described being hit by Mercer as getting kicked by a mule, and his devastating knockout of Tommy Morrison proved he could end fights with a single, perfectly placed shot. Lewis faced Mercer in 1996 when both were elite contenders, and admits the psychological pressure of fighting someone with that kind of concussive power was immense. Ray could turn your lights out with one punch, Lewis reflects. You couldn't make a single mistake because he was always hunting for that knockout shot. Lewis won a unanimous decision through superior boxing skills, but he never underestimated how close he was to disaster throughout those 10 rounds. Mercer's power commanded absolute respect and constant vigilance. 7. George Foreman. George Foreman's comeback in the 1990s was supposed to be a novelty act, but the aging heavyweight proved he still carried the same devastating power that had terrorized opponents in the 1970s. At over 40 years old, Foreman was knocking out younger, stronger fighters with single punches that defied logic and physics. Lewis watched Foreman's knockout of Michael Moorer to win the heavyweight title at age 45 and realized that power is the last thing to leave a fighter. George proved that one punch can change everything, regardless of age, Lewis admits. Fighting someone with that kind of power is always scary because you can dominate the entire fight and still lose in 1 second. While they never fought, Lewis respected Foreman's power enough to be grateful they existed in slightly different eras. 6. Andrew Golota. Andrew Golota was a 6'4" Polish heavyweight with exceptional boxing skills and devastating power. But what made him truly frightening was his complete unpredictability and history of self-destruction. Golota had twice beaten Riddick Bowe before getting disqualified for repeated low blows, proving he could compete with the elite while simultaneously showing he was mentally unstable. Lewis admits that fighting someone as talented but psychologically volatile as Golota created unique dangers. Andrew could box, he could punch, but you never knew what he would do, Lewis recalls. Would he fight clean, or would he lose his mind? That uncertainty made him dangerous in ways that went beyond just boxing skills. The psychological warfare of facing someone who might intentionally hurt you illegally added a layer of fear that pure boxing skill couldn't address. 5. Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson's reputation preceded him like a dark cloud of violence and intimidation. Even in his decline, Iron Mike carried the aura of a destroyer who had broken stronger men through sheer psychological terror before the opening bell even rang. Lewis had watched Tyson demolish opponents in the late 1980s with a ferocity that seemed almost inhuman. Mike's power was legendary, but his intimidation was what really made him dangerous, Lewis admits. He made fighters beat themselves before he ever landed a punch. When they finally met in 2002, Lewis faced not just a fighter, but a myth that had haunted the heavyweight division for 15 years. Lewis dominated Tyson with superior boxing skills, but he never forgot how close disaster lived every time Tyson threw his devastating hooks. The fear was real, even against a faded legend. 4. Vitali Klitschko. Vitali Klitschko was a 6'7", 250-pound Ukrainian giant who brought a terrifying combination of size, power, durability, and an absolutely iron chin that seemed incapable of being hurt. What made Vitali especially frightening was his relentless pressure and willingness to walk through punishment to land his own devastating shots. Their 2003 encounter proved to be Lewis's most physically demanding fight, with Vitali pressuring him relentlessly despite suffering a severe cut that eventually stopped the contest. Vitali was the strongest man I ever fought, Lewis admits. He just kept coming, no matter what I hit him with. His chin was unbelievable. Lewis won by technical knockout due to the cut, but both fighters knew the fight could have gone either way. Vitali's combination of size, durability, and determination represented Lewis's worst nightmare, an opponent who couldn't be broken. The Ukrainian's relentless forward march and ability to absorb Lewis's best punches without flinching created a level of physical and mental exhaustion that Lewis had never experienced before. Lewis knew he had barely survived against a force of nature who simply refused to acknowledge pain or defeat. 3. Evander Holyfield. Evander Holyfield was smaller than Lewis, but possessed something far more dangerous than size. An absolutely indomitable warrior's heart that had carried him through wars that would have broken other men. Holyfield had defeated Mike Tyson twice, survived brutal trilogies with Riddick Bowe, and consistently found ways to win fights he had no business winning. Lewis faced Holyfield twice, drawing controversially in 1999 before winning clearly in their rematch. Evander was scared because he simply refused to lose, Lewis reflects. You could beat him for 11 rounds and he'd still find a way in the 12th. His heart was his most dangerous weapon. Fighting someone who wouldn't quit no matter how badly they were losing created psychological pressure that was exhausting. Holyfield's legendary determination made him dangerous until the final bell rang. The real deal's ability to dig deep when facing adversity meant Lewis could never relax, never coast, never assume victory was secure. Every round against Holyfield required maximum effort and concentration because one moment of complacency could result in Holyfield finding that legendary second wind and turning the fight completely around. 2. Oliver McCall. Oliver McCall was a 6'2" heavyweight with devastating power and a personal history that made him completely unpredictable. McCall had shocked the boxing world by knocking out Lewis in 1994 with a perfect right hand, proving he possessed the power to end fights instantly against even the most skilled opponents. What made McCall especially terrifying was the uncertainty surrounding his mental state and preparation. Oliver on his best night could beat anyone, Lewis admits. But you never knew which Oliver would show up, the focused destroyer or the troubled fighter battling his demons. Their rematch in 1997 ended bizarrely with McCall having an emotional breakdown in the ring, but Lewis never forgot how easily McCall had knocked him out in their first meeting. That one-punch power commanded eternal respect and fear. The psychological scar from their first encounter never fully healed for Lewis. McCall had proven that regardless of skill advantages or superior preparation, one perfectly timed punch could erase everything. That knowledge haunted Lewis every time he stepped into the ring, serving as a constant reminder that in heavyweight boxing, overconfidence kills and complacency ends careers in devastating fashion. 1. Riddick Bowe. Returning to the top spot is Riddick Bowe, the fighter Lewis feared most throughout his entire career. Bowe possessed everything that kept Lewis awake at night. Comparable size at 6 feet 5 inches, exceptional boxing skills honed under Eddie Futch, devastating power in both hands, and the heart of a champion who had proven himself in the most brutal heavyweight wars of the era. Riddick was the complete package, Lewis admits candidly. He could box, he could bang, he had size, and he had been through wars with Holyfield that proved his heart. Fighting him would have been absolute hell for both of us. The fact that Bowe avoided the fight by dumping his title haunted Lewis's career. He never got the chance to face his greatest fear and prove himself against the one opponent who matched his every advantage. Lewis believes their potential showdown would have been the defining fight of the 1990s heavyweight era, a battle between two complete fighters with no clear advantage for either man. The absence of this fight remains one of boxing's greatest tragedies, robbing fans of what could have been an all-time classic and leaving Lewis with an eternal question mark on his otherwise impeccable legacy. Lennox Lewis's honesty about fear reminds us that courage isn't the absence of fear, but action despite it. His willingness to acknowledge the fighters who truly terrified him while still stepping into the ring to face them separates legends from pretenders. These 10 opponents represented different types of danger: raw power, indomitable will, complete skill sets, and psychological unpredictability. Yet Lewis faced 9 of them and emerged victorious in nearly every encounter. Which of these fighters do you think was his toughest challenge? Comment below and subscribe for more boxing legends.